Hello, everybody, and welcome to Capsule Cast Teams. As you know, this is our new function for the off season to introduce basically the general audience to the teams. I am your host, DoorGuard, with my co-host Donut,
Hello, everyone.
and our special guest this week, the coach for hire for Sentai Squad, Sir Gommel.
Toku Sentai.
So I say that because technically, in the time of this being recorded, there's a coach swap up going around with the teams. That is trying out time, but pretty sure everybody knows who the main man is over at Sentai, the posing master himself. So not much real debate going on there. Did you guys have any words before we get going on into what Sentai is?
No, let's get right into it.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. So here we have the glorious banner. Whether or not it gets changed, we don't know, but we do get nice made banners each season, as we showed last week with Derp, and this is Sentai. So, Gama, why don't you give us a breakdown of kind of who and what your team is?
Well, Sentai Squad is, of course, the posing masters, the team who pretty much is, and again, inspired by Sentai series. Whether it's their costume, whether it's their the way they pose, the way they speak, the way they kind of carry themselves. Some for justice, some not so much for justice, and some just like just to punch into lower areas with their justice.
Mhm.
Yeah, certainly a very captivating team. Always under discussion. Some people think it's purely a posing team, and that would be Team Posing. But this is Sentai Squad, so there's a big cutoff. It's caused a lot of debate, but I mean, it's in the name. They are based off the Sentai style. They are not just a team based around posing characters. So,
Sure.
does it maybe limit them in some areas? Yeah, Sergio might say so, but I think the enjoyment of what they have as is has been a huge part of kind of their love and success.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, and again, they all do represent Sentai, and they all happen to have poses. I think you could still represent Sentai and not necessarily pose, but I think it's more so how you carry and hold yourself. But that's kind of the options we have, and they, for better or for worse, all have that posing as a part of their kit. Which, of course, I mean, we'll get more into that further into the slide.
Yeah, Donna, you have any comments on kind of your views as another coach looking at Sentai?
Sure, yeah. I've always viewed Sentai as I know it's a little cliche, but that underdog story where you want them to win. You always kind of like root for them in your back pocket, right? So, always have kind of been favoring for this team, apart from my own office, obviously. Um, but for Sentai, it's very interesting. They have a lot of they used to be the Ginyu Force, right, way back, and they got the new editions of the Justice Duo, which is very helpful, I imagine. Say when we made the All Stars last season, so they have a lot of potential on the team, um, and it's always cool. And I think Noel has told me in the past that um, doesn't happen often, but as often as you'd like. But when the all five characters come into like that synergy and they just like all pop off, it's so satisfying to see because you see all the struggles and the unfortunate situation with the master list. So it's like, oh, when I do finally have that moment, it's like, this is glorious, this is amazing, this is what we signed up for, and it's fantastic to see them. Um, so I'm hoping for the best for them for this season to make the playoffs.
Yeah, they're certainly a team that kind of tells a story as the league goes
Mm-hmm.
on.
Yep.
Yeah, and I feel the team almost feels very tag teamish in more sense than most other teams, just because a lot of their
Oh,
kits involve each other, especially with ults. Like you'll see, like Jace or Birder, they'll both summon each other for their combo. Same with Saiyaman, Woman. And then of course Ginny will just swap bodies with somebody. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on there, but it makes it feel like beyond tagging into the character, it feels like there's a bit more representation overall within the team, within the
yeah,
members and their
yeah.
actions.
I do. It makes it feel more like if they're actually real people, it makes sense that they're tagging in for the match, right? So I like
Yeah,
that.
certainly a lot of options there and a lot of fun that it brings into, and especially in commentary. Well, let's get on to some of the additional kind of notes of the team. Obviously, they used to be, as said before, the Ginyu Force, kind of how they were. They were original team as Ginyu Force, but with moving over here, they decided, or as kind of a whole entity, we decided to uh, help them out a little bit, and they kind of became Sentai because it A, stayed with the really consistent theme of Ginyu Force, and B, it allowed them to have access to a few more characters. I think that was something that Zerg almost say was quite enjoyable to get, is to be able to basically not change the team, but still grow the team in a very interesting way. So obviously a big thing. And due to teams like them and a few others, such as the Old Boos and I forget others. There was certainly a few that used to be maybe even cold that didn't have a ton of options per se, and were kind of locked into the characters they had, and basically just that's where the FA system came from. I don't really need to go through all these notes. Are there any notes you guys really want to kind of point on?
For me, I would like to mention the Rush B2s. I feel like we probably have the most Rush B2s of any team in the league in terms of what we have, and so clashing is a big part of the team. And on that same note, I think I mentioned on here too that we're the only team that has just all Rush ultimates, not a single beam or ball or any sort of ultimate like that on the team currently.
Yeah, this is a caveat with currently due to some of the Master List members, but they obviously weren't quite good enough to make it. So with the current performing lineup, Rush Ultimates up plenty. And of course, Donut's line here of the typical underdog. Donut,
Yeah.
you have some information on their playoff appearances?
Yeah, I was doing some research on the history within the league, and they've actually made the playoffs 2 different times, both in season 7 and in season 10, what we consider the old era of the league. And they made it to the first round in both of those, but I think those are the only appearances thus far for them in the playoffs. I think that's correct. Um, so I know they had one chance where they almost made it, and they have a lot of times where they almost make it. It's almost like they the one little step up, right, to make it. And I do honestly think that they can do it this season with getting the Seiya, the Justice duo under their belt a little bit better. I know it's the first time they worked with them last season. Um, so I do think without a doubt that they can make to the playoffs this year with that experience with those characters.
Yeah, I would say when it comes down to the underdog status, Sir Goma could probably describe it best as they don't tend to lose because they get horribly outperformed. It tends to come down to like almost a bar difference, it feels like. They're that team that's always seems to be fighting back up, and that slight disadvantage that happens in some form of fashion, whether it be the health pushback or an ult hitting or something, is always like that slight edge. But yeah, I guess where would you call what really brings the team as an underdog team that's been kind of solidly in that spot?
Who you asked on this one?
Oh, Sir Gommel, sorry.
Well, could you ask that one more time?
I was just asking,
I,
what are
I,
your appearance or opinions on what makes this team kind of that persistent underdog status?
okay, I got you. I didn't catch the whole thing, so I was
Yeah,
trying to
all
play it
good.
off, and I couldn't continue.
No, we're all open here.
I would say just there's not really anyone on the team in particular that like is a. I feel like their stats overall aren't really. They're pretty average. I wouldn't say there's like any like you can look at any character and think like, oh, this is like the heavy hitter of the team. I feel like um, they're all fairly average in terms of like their ability one on one. It's when they come together as a team, I feel like that kind of steps them up a bit more. But just by nature, I mean, when you think of the Ginyu Force, I mean, they're a group of people that appeared way back early in Dragon Ball Z, and they represented this game very uniquely. But I feel like compared to the other cast, I feel like they're definitely outshined by a lot of others, especially with transformations and things of that sort. Same with the Saiyas. The Saiyas typically more were side characters in the series. I think Saiya Woman was really only in the movies once, and Saiya Man had like a filler arc about Saiya Man. So they were more, I guess, kind of jokish characters in that sense. So, even though they do have decent kits, it does, I feel, reflect in their abilities overall. But I think that kind of leads to it, like to that nature of the team being a bit under in terms of like, when you look at other teams out there, and when you see like Muscle, for example, you'll see other certain characters like Roshi. Okay, then you got Broly, and you're just like, okay, well, I can see that. So there's not really someone you can look in the team and say, oh yeah, Jace, or Birder or somebody like that, that like, oh yeah, he's definitely somebody to watch out for. Like it just doesn't scream that, and at least until you go into the season, and then our actions speak more for our characters than just us telling people like, oh, this character's doing really good. It's how they appear to everyone else during the league, and that's usually where they get their reputation.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir. I know, Donut. You were the one that made reference to it not too long ago. I guess. How would you say, or is there anything you could add to what you would call their underdog status there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the characters just by design perspective from the game developers. But um, going to Gomo's point regarding the B2s and the thresholds and all, that also is a lot harder to land than the ball or the wave or even the as you said, the energy ballet, genocide blast type of things or trap shooters. The thresholds are notoriously hard to hit. So that's a big detriment to a lot of what they like to do. Because if it lands, it works beautifully, right? You have a nice 17,000 ult in some cases, right? Or higher. And then in other cases, like, well, missed the ult, so you have to wait for a little bit until you get the blast off back and be able to do the pose again, which is a hit or miss in that regard. Um, so it's a lot. A lot of things have to align for them in regards to the thresholds, and I think a saving grace for them in that regards is Jace actually. He has the kit to pop off with Crusher Ball with the full power energy wave. He does have that ability to spam and hit with fairly good B2s, right, in damage and in hit ratio. It's just a matter of getting him to that point, right, for the AI or for the build to work with it.
Yeah.
So I do think they have a lot of areas that can make the underdog to a top contender, but it's going to take some finagling with Jason, figuring out how to best utilize those thresholds.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to what they're based off of. The Power Rangers,
Yeah.
Sentai, all that. They're
Hmm.
meant to be serious. They're presented as a serious thing, as a serious threat, even the evil versions, all that. But when you take a step back, you realize there's just a little bit of that, you know, imagination added to it. That kind of step makes them not
Yeah.
really that serious. And I think that unfortunately was translated stat wise a little bit into the game, but we don't need to go too much in that because they've obviously put in some pretty good results. I
Oh yeah.
mean, Sentai Squad's done a 9-6 season, just to goes to show
Hmm.
you that nobody can be taken out. I
Yeah.
think they're the last ones to want to be pitied upon. They want to just take
Yeah.
everyone. If they could go 15-0 and rub it in, they would do it immediately.
Of course they would.
Well, shall we get
Agreed.
on to probably the number one or kind of the main issue the team may be perceived to have,
Mhm.
and kind of the main thing I need to talk about before going into each character is the posing drawback. So this is one of their biggest strengths and largest weaknesses as well. Every character on the current roster, Ginyu, Seiyaman, Jace, Saiyaman, and Birder, have a long pose animation that immediately puts them into max power mode. The issue is it comes with a big key negative, so they charge slower and regain slower till they get back to full key. And that's just when it ends. So if they use the super or whatever, that's just they get that. And then due to how long it takes usually for the pose, because they go through the full posing situation, it makes them wide open. So it's one of those high risk, high rewards. Great on the one side, it means they can always get to their ult. Bad on the other side, because it leaves them wide open. And if they miss, then it leaves them at a lot harder time to get more B2s off. So how else would you want to describe that, Gommel? The posing drawback that your team persists with?
Yeah, with the poses like you'd mentioned, it can create good situations where like you have a character come in with like vetoes or something like that. They come in with max blast stocks, launch a B2 or ultimate, and then can do it two more times in an ideal situation. And of course, they would all have to connect, and that's of course a different story. But it can be very good. But as a result, if you don't give them like light body, especially for some of the ones that posed longer, they'll just repeatedly just get interrupted because the characters will just like to throw intermediate like key blasts or little balls or orbs. Like they'll be flying around, shoot a key blast, knocks them out of it, and then they just kind of stop for a bit, and that basically just kind of ruins the flow that they're trying to create. Um, the Ginyu Force members, their max power poses aren't as long, but they still have a long enough duration that can definitely hurt them too. Because usually they'll do them like close range. After hitting somebody away, then they'll immediately get knocked back out of it, or tank a B2 or something. The Saiyas themselves are probably the biggest issues with that, because both Saiyan man and woman, they have really long, probably some of the longest B1 animations for a max power mode. And I've seen it even in testing that unless they combo into it, knock them away, and the character doesn't fly it back immediately or launch in a B2, they don't usually get it off unless they have like light body, and even then it's sometimes not worth it because of the key negative too. Because then once they get that key negative, if they have no B1 stocks, they don't have the ability to gain enough key, and sometimes they'll spend charging while the other person's already at max power, and then it's an uphill battle from there until they can get more. So it's very frustrating, but again very satisfying. Is I guess how I would describe it.
Yeah, just looking back at what the 2020 season here, correct me if I'm wrong, Don. I believe it was what week. It was either 13 or 14 or 14 and 15. Jace really showed off the power of being able to just max power mode, like crusher balls and stuff, and just getting that bonus damage and nearly going elite, almost back to back. So really shows that there is a great positive on the one side of having max power mode due to the bonus damage if you do connect the B, to the fact that it takes scaling off your melee damage, as well as getting rid of the combo caps. You can just keep going until your opponent does something. So yeah, it is a
Yeah,
drawback, but can have a
yeah, it was
high ceiling.
yeah, I think it was week 12. It was like 97,000 or something. Where he faced Budokai actually, and he he did 3K away from elite status. So like he can pop off. We know Jason pop off. So
I mean, it's really all
um
their characters. So
oh yeah, the man went 6 for 6 on the B2s that day. So he did very well for himself.
yeah, I guess Don, how would you describe this as a drawback? Would you say it's a needed handicap to a degree so that they can't just
Um
run us over Sentai style, or
I don't know about all that. It's something that it's a blessing and a curse, because obviously a curse question is if anything lands on them, it will knock them out with a pose, right? But in regards to what the B1 itself does, it's one of the better ones you'd imagine, right? Saying, oh, I have every character have the ability to do max power anytime they want at their whim. That's really nice on paper, right? Um, so it's just a matter of making the best out of a awkward situation, I guess you would say, right? It's one of those like glass half full, glass half empty type situations, right? And I imagine you want to take it as a more a positive, right? Say, hey, we have every character can do ult, can do max power than ult, or a B2 in Jace's case, and the idea is, well, if we can get every character to consistently be able to make the B1s work, then we can be a really, really solid team. And it's just a matter of making that happen with AIs or builds, or that's just the fun
I
behind the
think
scenes
your
portion
earlier
of it.
statement basically summed it perfectly. Half glass full, half glass empty. It's
Yeah,
kind of a character by character basis. I think Gommel can
yeah,
attest. There are certain characters that he does want to see it, and other characters he's like, just please never use it for the love of God. If I could remove your blast stocks, I would.
do do you know which character has the quickest of the B1s?
Oh, I can't recall. I want to say, I think I would say maybe Ginyu,
Okay.
or maybe Raccoon or Jace. I can't remember
Yeah, I
the
think
animation. They're all
Kurkum
really close.
Jace have very
Mhm.
quick ones. The issue is less of the time, and it's more of, as we'll get into when going over each character, kind of their body size has actually played a huge impact into getting
Sure.
it off. Because the bigger you are,
Yeah.
the hard, the easier it is to get hit. So
So Dodo's the best, right?
he's the
Yes.
best in one category, and that is being
Mhm.
small.
Hell
Uh,
yeah.
shall we get moving on to
Let's
the
do it.
individual members of the Sentai Squad?
Let's do it.
Well, we
Let's
have to
do this.
start somewhere, and why not with the Captain Ginyu?
Hey, it's Kitten.
He is the captain, and he does what he needs to do. So, just quick rundown of some of his pros and cons. Obviously, he's an extremely versatile fighter with great melee and great blast twos, being a volley and a beam, just doing very good with those. And his ult, as said, basically resets his health to full. So, if he does manage to hit it, he swaps bodies with the character from the Namekian saga, which allows him to get all of his health back. And he has some of the better combos. Of course, he has his Ginyu pose, and then he has his self-harm, which we have modded to, instead of taking life, takes ki, which gives him a boost in both in ki, super damage, attack damage, and in defense. So just overall, does kind of everything. It seems to do it well, though with those cons. Obviously, he loves to spam that self-harm, funny enough, so he basically just never has ki. He drains himself by always punching himself. And even though that ult full heals him, it comes with a major damage reduction, and he does not get access to any Blast 1s or Blast 2s, if I'm uh, 100%.
Yeah,
That
I
is
believe so.
correct.
Yes.
And as we found in recent times, as Sir Gommel has had to fight against, he is allergic to Costume 1, so that has been an interesting issue for sure. So how would you describe your captain here, Sir Gommel?
Well, I would say he's definitely our Mr. Consistent for the team. He's come a long way from where he came from. Arguably one of our worst members pre-difficulty change, and then after the difficulty change back in the previous seasons, another season to kind of get a feel for him. And then after that, he's pretty much been fairly consistent, and even more so now that we were able to mod out his self-harm damage to himself. Because considering, I mean, on the test that I have had with him in, he does it a lot. So imagine if that was all health. I mean, he would basically take half of his life, and then the only other person would never, like, unless he body swaps. It's like, yeah, you're not getting much stats off of me today. But yeah, no, when he self harms, I feel like he somehow functions more like an android because he never has ki. So typically he'll just run in and melee and fight, and he'll just kind of gradually regenerate the ki. And then as he gets more stocks of his B1, anything that he does more. His melee, his more defense, even his charge rate goes up substantially to where, like, when he does decide to charge, it's almost enough to get him max power, and then he immediately self harms and removes it. But but still, it doesn't seem to hurt him much. And honestly, his B1s his B2s are okay, but ideally, we just want him to use his B1 and then just go in. And he typically does that. And when he does use his B2s, he typically does it before he self harms. And once he self harms, he tends to not do it, which is nice. Not all the time, but he's been pretty consistent about that. The only drawback is, again, his ultimate, which I feel like whenever he does that, or whenever it does connect, I cannot think for the life of me a single time that he actually did anything else after doing it. I feel like it's just here's some bonus damage for the other team. They can just, like, oh, you want someone to go elite? Here you go. Here's a Ginyu again. You can just pound him down and get some more stats. Bloat your team a bit. It's just he feels like he functions differently. It could just be because he has no access to anything besides melee. And charging, that it just messes with the AI to the point where he just kind of flies around and just doesn't seem to do much, which is unfortunate, because I think it'd be cool or very fun if he could actually do a bit more than what he already does in there. But we don't really rely on him ulting, and whenever he does, it's usually blocked. He doesn't usually ult that often anyway. So, but yeah, I'm just really glad he's come where he's actually the captain now, instead of being like the captain and just name only. I feel like he kind of holds the team together.
Sure.
Yeah, Donut, how would you describe coming up against Ginyu? He's obviously been a pretty steady Eternal Life user for them as well. Knowing, let's say you were going up against him this next week, he's definitely a character to be concerned about, I would assume. But coming in, what would you see when looking at him?
Yeah, he's definitely one of those all-round type fighters. I like Gomel's statement of he's kind of the glue for the team, as well. He's kind of similar to an android in how he operates. He's very similar to 19 in a sense. He doesn't rely on a lot of B2s or just his ult or anything like that. He says, hey, I want to be in your face. Just keep on pummeling you down, and then hope that's enough, right? And then when he does get the key, just gets rid of it immediately, right? So with the self-harm, which is a curse in one aspect, but a blessing in the other aspect. Obviously, for what they want to do with him, he wants to be in the face, put him on that melee build, put him on that healing build, very much just pummel you down. What I think was a very smart choice from the buff he got for the self-harm change from health to the key. That's a very smart change. I do think that was a one of the better decisions that you could have done with him. So props to you, you Sentai, for that. I don't see many faults with Ginyu as a character right now. He is the glue for the team. He is literally what makes this team consistent enough, in my opinion. The the downsides of it is that while he does have really good B2s, he doesn't actually utilize any of those B2s really often, at least as much time as you want him to. The only thing that I can say that's a really downside is that that 1v1 that drains the key. However, they made a way to make that con into a positive. So overall, this is a very solid character. Very solid character.
Well, with that, is there anything you'd like to add, Gomel, on your captain before we get moving on to your next member?
No, I think I said my piece with him. He's made me very proud. I'm just glad that he is not the deadweight he used to be.
Yeah, certainly a very interesting stylized character as well, so being able to enjoy his presence on screen without him just losing HP has been a blessing. So, with that, we will move on to Say a Woman, who was by far almost the standout player this last season. So, again, going quickly through pros and cons. She's been a decent all-rounder, kind of can work with a lot of different builds that they've tried, and she's been pretty decent with just defense, able to do damage on her own. She tends to combo, even though she has only rush B2s, can combo into them quite consistently and has just rushed down people. And of course, she has the max power mode blast one and as well as another stat boosting one. So she just does what everything she needs to do to get things done. The only, probably the biggest con she has outside of only rush B2s is she has absolutely nothing for projectiles. So it's like the enemy characters always have light body because she has no key blast of any form or variety and no projectiles of any form or variety. So would you say Say Woman's your kind of number two, Gommel, or how would you describe the kind of the battle Valkyrie here?
Well, I would say, I mean, of course, based on the stats themselves, I mean, she definitely far outperformed the rest of the members of Sentai. I would say I would probably rate her a bit better than Ginyu, although I think Ginyu's a bit more consistent. But she definitely puts the work in. There's just certain situations where I feel she kind of suffers in terms of, and that's mainly like with kaiju related enemies, because she literally, unless she's max power, she can't do anything to them. If she decides to like B2, well, there goes your max power mode, and there goes your brick wall breaker. And that makes it very difficult, especially when you have, you know, a decent amount of characters in the league that can potentially change to that kind of that nature, or if they just get like a brick wall effect. But she does do very well comboing, and I do see her combo with her B2s quite a bit. And she uses both fairly equally, and they both do decent damage. She also has one of the best charge rates in the game, which makes it easier to not always have to maybe give her that charge. And she's not really as affected by the negative charge that other characters are from her pose as a result of that. I think only one character is, I think she's like Teen Gohan, or maybe I think he's the only one that actually has a higher charge rate than she does. But she's kind of up there with some of the big hitters in terms of that. One thing I did notice is that when she is in max power, I don't know if that's just an issue just with her character, but when she ping pongs, the ping pong never ends in like usually you'd end with like a B2 or something like that would finish it off. She just kind of finishes off and then it just kind of ends. And that could just be just how her character is. I would have thought it might have maybe been one of her B2s that she just kind of flies in and just kicks them or something, but it's never been a big issue, but it's something that I have noticed. So the max power isn't always as damaging as it could be, but she's been really good, and she's been very surprising. I don't think a lot of people expected much out of Say a Woman when she was brought into the league, because she had somewhat of a history with, I think, the Valkyries, and it was never really like she never really stood out with them, even though Valkyrie's had a lot of people that, admittedly so, would make you not really see her, considering they had Rayleigh and 18 and all those other people that just kind of overshadowed her. But she's coming to her own, and I'm just really glad she was worth the investment, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she can do coming into the next season.
Yeah, she made it to the All-Stars for a reason. She showed off that she can indeed do quite a lot with what many would consider a more limited move set. So definitely always a pleasant surprise when you have a character who's maybe deemed as weak when you look at her on paper, but pops off in her own way. So how do you describe Saywoman Donut?
I describe Sailorman as someone who is upfront in what they're going to do. You know, seeing Sailorman, that she is going to go in. She is going to go towards you and not kind of play back. She'll be aggressive and in your face. And her whole kit is centered around going in, right? Her rush B2s, her ultimate, and that's kind of how her combos with the grab into a B2. All that is just very aggro. And what she does, the one thing, because she doesn't have the projectile aim as stated earlier, but what she does super well. And there was a reason that she made the All-Stars, because she was doing it so well and so consistently week after week. And I think if they can consistently get to that point and keep her at that 50k area, they are golden. They are golden with her. She's just a very solid character, very, very solid character. She's one of the characters when I am prepping for, say, Sentai Squad, I am looking at Sailor saying, hey, how do I tackle this? How do I handle these flashing potential of the Sailor Woman, Ginyu, Sailor Man, etc. And she's definitely one that I have to do a game plan around when I'm prepping for Sentai.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty much a lot of what she is. Not much else to really go on this. Colin, do you have any other words on kind of your number 2 right now, or is it just keeping in the plan? She's sticking around.
Oh yeah, there's no plan for her to leave anytime soon. I can tell you that. She's
Any
got a home with Sentai.
any hints on build changes? Is she switching off defensive +2 to maybe super +2, or is it just is that still in the works?
It's still in the works. We haven't tested her as much this off season, mainly because we had other prior characters to really focus on, and with her being so solid, it allowed us to kind of give our attention to other people. I do see us maybe looking at other avenues for her for that, and I could definitely see the potential and some other types of build variations. And luckily, since we got an early start with testing this off season, we're actually quite a bit ahead of schedule, and with the amount of tests that the awesome testing team has been putting out for us, we have been able to get a lot of data for a lot of our characters that needed it. And soon, once we get past those characters, I feel like we can maybe start working on her a bit and more so refining Saywoman, and utilizing other builds, other blues to greater effect. That's the hope, anyways.
Yeah, it's always nice having a few characters that don't need much done from the previous season, so you can focus on the ones that do need some done. Have a little bit of stability there. So, shall we get on to your third member and a potential lover of Saywoman?
Potential. Ooh.
Potential. Ooh.
Ooh, yeah, that's right. We have the Great Saiyaman, of course, a very popular, persona in the DBZ community as a whole, and always been a very fun character. But some good pros and cons because he has brought quite a lot to Sentai this season as well. As he has a very diverse move set, being still rush focused, but he actually does have an explosive wave, so that's helped to diversify. Obviously, super explosive wave in itself is an immense pro. It's probably one of the best B2s in the game, being just a giant ball. Very easy to hit, and a lot of characters fly into it. And of course, he has some very strong blast ones as well, more so than just the max power. He actually has one that gives him some damage and key charge. I believe it's melee and key charge. So he gets some good use of his blast stocks off. And unfortunately, one of his big cons is it seems like he's an ever-changing struggle of what the issue is. Every time it seems like he's maybe popping off and gonna go crazy, he seems to fall back on himself. So while indeed a very strong character and a very dependable one, he has some weird drawbacks. I think Sir Gommel wishes he could maybe pass off onto Goldo and just throw that guy away even further. So Yeah, I guess how would you describe Mr. Sandman here?
Yeah, if only we could just throw all of our garbage into the Goldo garbage and give it all to him. That would make things so much nicer. Um, no, he had a kind of a weaker kind of start to the season, and then he kind of picked up a bit, then he kind of fell back a bit. He ended on a pretty decent average though for what he was, and admittedly we didn't get as much testing with him done that we had intended because we had a couple other characters to really focus on, that being Ginyu and of course Say Woman mainly, and she required a lot of work initially to really get to where she is now. We got to him later, and we just kind of had a late start in the testing season, so we didn't get as many as we wanted to, but we had a decent AI pool that we built for him initially. But what's funny is the AIs that we've come to him now, the one that we used last season is not even on the list, so it definitely makes a difference for him. And even in some of our 4v4s that we've done, he has shown that he can pop off and he can do really well on various blues for us, which is nice. His charge rate's pretty decent as well. Super explosive wave is, again, like Dora mentioned, is amazing. Even his B2 junk shot or Justice Slash, it has really good tracking. It actually has quite a bit of range to it. Unlike Say Woman's, which typically doesn't, it just kind of goes in a straight line. His actually kind of follows, and I feel like it connects more often than that hers does, and he does combo into it pretty well. I also really enjoy his combos, the way he just kind of spins in a circle, pirouettes, and then like kicks in the air. I mean, it's fun when it connects, and he'll sometimes loop those combos, similar to like Birder in terms of like how flashy his melee is. And I feel like he might have even taken a few cues from Birder, or Birder showed him some of the ropes in terms of like, how should I be the fastest in the universe, or something like that. But yeah, he's been pretty good. He still needs some work. We have done a lot of work with him this season, and I feel he's in a pretty good place. Some various builds that work well with him. But yeah, he's definitely a solid part of the team, and I'm looking forward to what we can see from him again this coming season.
Yeah, don't know how would you describe Sandman, the versatile fighter himself, without, maybe going too crazy, as he is very similar to, say, a woman's remarks you probably would agree upon.
Yeah, I was about to mention that a lot of what Sandman does is what Sandwoman does. He's very just upfront, and he's like, if you're playing like a poker game, he's face up and what he's gonna do. He's going in, right? That's what he's kind of built around, right? He has the rush B2s. He does have that super explosive waves, but he wants to be close when he does it, right? He does nothing. So a lot of what he'll do, he'll telegraph, right? But it's the same situation as Sandwoman, where he does one thing, but he does it super well. So he's very consistent in what he does. He had 38k last season, so that's pretty solid, right? Obviously for room for improvement, but pretty solid overall as a character. The downside is that he is so rush dependent. He's easily blockable, right? With how the AIs have adapted to that in the new difficulty, it does make it sometimes hard um, to uh, to land those B2s or those ults. Um, so that's the downside. But as I said, he does one thing, he does very well. He has that clash potential as well if you want to give him anything like Power of Rage or maybe not Dragon Power, but Power of Rage at the very least. And that is one thing that other teams have to be mindful of against Sentai, right? Say a man, say a woman, both love to be in your face, both love to clash, both love to just hunt you down with the fists of justice, and
Justice.
you say, well, this is suck, and we need to look into Sandman's ethical and morality issues there. That's a whole other issue with the Justice Punch. Some low blows, if
Hey,
you
the
will.
Fist of Justice has no equality. It hits all.
Well, you know what? Well, it is a problem when Woman is using the justice on her own teammates. All right, we need to talk about that later. Um, but it's fine. It's a fine character for Sandman, and he's very similar to Woman who does. I think Woman does her Sandman's job just better. Slightly, not by much, but a little bit better than Sandman does.
Yeah, certainly a character on paper that seems like you'd do better, but as we've seen performance-wise, that maybe hasn't been it, but I don't think he's performed bad at all. He's just been one that only has been on the team for one season, so finding that kind of home ground is still in the process. And as Sir almost said last time, they've had a lot of time to test, a lot of extra time, and I'll tell you from being a tester, Sandman's been in almost all of them.
Mhm.
So he's gonna get something figured out on probably the most detailed schedule. At this point, do you have a almost just like a thesis written on him, Sir Gommel?
Yeah, I had to kind of store it in my flash drive to make sure I don't lose it because it just takes up so much space on my computer. I just don't want to have to rewrite it again.
Well, do you guys have any final remarks on the the puncher of justice, the crusher of dreams, as some might say?
Not for me.
No, I think I've said my piece with justice.
Alrighty then, so I feel like people might have been missing, but let's get back to a few of the returning Ginyu Force members. So we'll go ahead and hit up on Jace! If you wonder why that is the pronunciation, it's because he just absolutely loves using his max power mode Blast 1. So he's a very strong B2 spammer, Crusher Ball, Full Power Energy Wave. Maybe not the best on paper, but he hits with them more often than not, making them look extremely solid. And he also has Explosive Wave, so if opponents get too close, he can knock them back a good bit. And even though he has a Rush ult, he has shown his is he actually hits his quite a bit. We've seen it hit in the 20,000s more than a few times. So, very, very strong character, does massive damage, but he has that same B1 issue of losing the key. So, while you might get to hear Jace many times in the match, that's kind of his easiest way to get rid of his key penalty is to just not even acknowledge its existence. And of course, having his ult beat a rush makes it a lot harder to hit, even though it probably does some insane damage when it does. So, how would you describe Gommel? Would you describe your boy Jace here? Would you call him kind of the main cannon, the big gun per se, the high ceiling but lowest floor?
Yeah, I would describe our space Aussie as that. Yeah, he's had a very I guess been a rough spot since like the change of difficulty, and he's just never been the same. He does have moments of brilliance, and he does have great potential, especially with his two non-rush B2s that do really good damage. One being a 2-bar beat, energy wave, and the Crusher Ball 3-bar, which when he does those, they chunk pretty good. Which is great. His ult, even though it's a rush, he does connect with it, like Dora mentioned, decent enough. But the problem again with rush ults is that the AI tends to block them a lot. Um, you know, which is unfortunate because that takes care of a lot of damage he would otherwise deal with. His problem has been a lot of inconsistency, though. You'll get superstar Jace who just can't do nothing wrong, and he just pops off and almost goes elite. And then you have the other Jace that we don't talk about, but he just kind of just shows up and grabs whatever he gets from the table and just leaves. He takes the food with him and just leaves the party. Everyone's like, "Where'd our food go?" And Jace just took it, and it's like, well, now we have nothing. And that's kind of what I get a lot from Jace. He just kind of leaves us with nothing sometimes, and we just are further behind during a match. So we have actually been able to test him a lot though this season so far. So I feel like he's going to be in a better place than he was last season. But yeah, I really want to see him start working again because the old Jace used to be one of the characters that people would see and say, okay, here's Jace. He can turn this around, and I'd like to get to that point where we can say that, oh, if anyone could do it, Jace can.
Yeah, I think he's been a character that has shown that even though maybe stat-wise he's seen as a lower statted being so early in the season of the show, so those characters the earlier they were kind of maybe didn't get as much love as later in, but has not seen any of that as a disadvantage. How would you describe Jace Donut?
I
Besides being
describe him,
Aussie, you got to be original here.
yeah, obviously Aussie, but the way I describe him is the character with the highest ceiling on the team, right? He is definitely is the character to look out for B2 spams, which is obviously the big pro here, and he has the kit to do that. It's just a matter of finding the AI that does it, right? The tricky part about Jace is that when he gets to max power, he usually likes to throw an ult, right? So it's how do you get to the max power so you get to the max power bonus on the B2s, since that's where those are more likely to land than the rush ult is. And other than that, there's not really much else to say. He has a little bit of a con, right, in the ult rush, but that's really about it. He doesn't have obviously the max power mode B1 is obviously an issue, but that's for every character. So I see this character as almost like a feast of famine, which most B2 characters are. That if the B2s land, great. If they don't, well, it's a really sad day for you. And because you don't have melee that'll follow up, since you've heavily prioritized the B2 side of things, those will just land for like 9, 10k possibly, right? And your melee will be like 3,000, right? So if you want to kind of figure out a middle ground, as you put some things into his melee if you want, but that's why you have the Seiya duo and Ginyu, right? That's where those are going to. So it's a little finicky with Jace, but I do think he's a character that has a lot of upside to him, and not really much downside that I can see just from a get-go from a kit perspective. Other than that, is just making sure that you find out the AI's things, and if you want to utilize any semblance of like a quick fast attack or a serious towards his melee to see if you can help show up that area when he isn't spamming out the B2s as you like. But well, great character.
Yeah, I think he's always been a very bright spot for them, but unfortunately, as pretty much every team has struggled with, consistency is always something that could be, desired to be perfected. And I think Jace definitely represents that wholeheartedly. As said, he kind of sometimes just grabs his food and heads to the table before everybody else, and it is can't tell if he's just sad or what, but he does have his captain to help bail him out from time to time. So, shall I get moving on to the final member of the current roster then, or do you guys have anything else you'd like to add to our boy Jace here?
No, we can go. Go forward.
Let's do it.
All right, so the final member of the current squad is, of course, the fastest in the universe, Berter.
Hell yeah.
So, as
Boy.
known, he in the league has the fastest melee. Some might even say it's the fastest melee in the universe, and it is quite good at getting opponents. Basically, he always gets to go first when it comes to punching. And he also has very strong B2s. He has a very, very fast and decently tracking rush, and his energy ball is probably one of the best energy ball B2s in the game because it shoots too quickly, and they're pretty big. They're massive. They're like Android 17 size,
Yeah.
so they are very good blasts. So if to have some stuff to shoot, he's got some good ones, and of course he has very good blast ones, as pretty much every character on Sentai does. The biggest kind of downsides to him, unfortunately, are he's basically the biggest member that they have access to. That he's extremely tall, extremely large, which means he's an extremely large hitbox. Makes him a lot more susceptible to being kind of nicked by stuff. And he is a natural defense -1, which means he takes about 5% bonus damage from all sources. So makes him a little bit more of a glass cannon. Unfortunately, he struggles a little bit harder. He takes hits a little bit harder. So that being said, Gomel, how do you feel about your fastest in the universe? I know this last season maybe wasn't his most stellar, but obviously a character you guys have high hopes for.
Yeah, Birder was definitely one of the more disappointing members in terms of what we expected from him, because he had a very strong off season, in showing and tests and everything, and we really didn't expect him to just fall so hard, and we really don't know why. In the past, he has shown great potential, but he's been with Jace, very inconsistent. But his melee is so great. I mean, and when he gets in the flow of things, you'll see him just immediately just kind of just keep them in a melee loop. And if they don't block, he'll just keep melee looping them until they finally do. And with his B2s, like Dord mentioned, they're really solid. I mean, he does tend to connect with his rush B2, and his energy ball move does decent as well. And again, rush ultimate, I feel like he doesn't connect as often with his that Jace does, but yeah, I don't know really what to say about Birder. Is that he, on paper and his moveset, it feels very solid, but where he ended up just does not represent what you would expect from him. Going from one of the more solid members of the team to basically the Jason Birder at the bottom of our team, pretty much. So, which is very, very strange. Maybe he just didn't want Jace to feel lonely. I don't know, or it was the other way around. But Yeah, I don't know. We're really hoping to get some stuff working for him when we are starting to do tests with him, hoping to find something that works. And I really hope we do because I enjoy watching him, and when he really gets the momentum going, he can really put on the damage. And I just really hope we can see that birder again.
Yeah, I think he was a character who went through a lot of different builds this season, and even though he struggled, he actually still ended up having like not the worst season you'd expect. So he went from melee, super, defense, all over the place, and he still managed to pull out some pretty decent performances. So I think he's certainly a character, as said, that has high potential. It's just finding that, and this 2020 when it switched over to kind of the new league setting that we have, a lot of things changed. Characters that maybe were the best, not so much anymore, and kind of really happened all over the place. Just everybody kind of had their own issues. So, yeah, Donut, how do you feel about the giant blue man? Or I guess your opinions on the fastest in the universe.
Somewhat sad, because I know he can be really, really good. It's just, it's a matter of the glass cannon phenomenon, right? Like when he gets behind, it really shows. It really shows. But when he gets ahead and he just, like as Domo was saying, did them in that melee loop, it is insanely obnoxious, right? He just goes on like these 30 plus hit combos, and it's like you can't do anything about that. So what do, right? And he has the B2s that are similar to Android 17, which you mentioned earlier, Dora, just at a slightly lower damage. So it's like, well, wait, we have the same damage, the same B2 as this other dude, but lesser damage. So that kind of sucks, right? But he still has, it's still a solid B2. Don't get me wrong, it's still a very solid B2. It's just, it's one of those things that you see all the things that he can have, and you just want him to like pop off with it so well to say, hey, I see you game developers, I'm still not pop off anyway, right? Um, so does that, but it is definitely one of those finicky characters where if it depends on the day and depends on the opponent, I think, for better characters that are able to be really good at blocking or dodging is just going to give them so much issues. Like characters like Foster, who's notorious for being a little block heavy or dodge heavy. When I go up against her, would be a tough matchup for Berta. But characters like 19, not so much. But it would just style on 19 for sure because he's so slow. Um, but I think Berta has a definite place on the team and can definitely still pop off. It's just about finding the right matchups for him to shine.
Yeah, I think his downsides though being much more on the side of taking damage more so than
Yeah.
dealing damage has been his biggest flaw. So
Yeah.
always
The,
will be
the,
there. Unfortunately, there's pretty much nothing Gommel can do about that. He's gonna be
yeah.
a big boy, but he's gonna be a fast big boy. So
Yeah. You think that looking at his stature, you think he wouldn't have any natural minds. You think you have a buff actually in defense, right? But by his stature. But
I guess getting
game
punched in the
developers,
gut and going down by Goku is just too much.
yeah, just unlucky.
Yep.
I mean, Raccoon got punched in the gut by Goku, and he doesn't have a negative, so.
He's fine. What happened?
Well, he
Come on.
survived an explosion, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
Fortunately, Birder seemed to not put up too much of a fight once he lost. Once the captain left and his boy Jace was scaring him off. So, well, yeah, he is indeed a pretty decent character. Well, shall we get moving on to kind of the master list, the potential rejects or characters that could be on the team?
Rejets. This man said rejets.
Damn.
Wow.
I mean, Goldo's over there. I think Gombo would agree with that.
Goldo's amazing. Come on. Did you
Well,
see
the other
that one?
members got. Well, the other members got to throw their trash somewhere. I mean, you know.
All right, so Jiro is apparently good now. So,
I don't know about that one.
yeah,
that
now you understand. So, kind of their master list, the other members that they have, options two, um, Raccoon being probably the best option that they have on the side. They dropped him last season to help pick up Say a Man and Say a Woman. He has the highest natural defense in the league, the only character with just a natural defense +2 that isn't a giant character. He has a very strong damage grab, of course, just like everybody in the Sentai world, great B1s, and the only character to not have like any rush B2s. The issue he has is he is extremely slow melee. It looks like he's punching through probably marshmallows mixed with syrup, mixed with pretty much anything else you can think that's slow. It is slow, so he tends to get very very much hit out of everything he does, and of course he's a very very large character as well, so he gets hit by pretty much everything. Moving on to Goldo, he is the smallest character of all the Sentai characters, and he has the great B1s in a telekinesis stun in that, but his B2s are almost pitiful. He has a 3-bar volley that does maybe 3 to 4k, very, very, very weak if it all hits, even if it does. And a psychic rock throw, which we've seen unfortunately on many characters, just seems to be very hard B2 to hit. Pilaf being probably the biggest success with it, but even then it's still been a struggle, and weak melee. So just overall, just kind of a really rough character to work with. And then finally, Salza. Uh, don't really need to go into too much details on him. If you saw last week's episode, he is a main man member of the Team Derp. And with that, the only way they would ever get him is somehow, some way, doing some crazy trade to get him or picking him up from a drop. But very unlikely, but he is there. He is indeed an option by technicality. So, yeah, Gama, is there any, I guess, would you like to go over really Raccoon and Goldo on what they could add or the reasoning why they're basically left off for now?
Yeah, Raccoon, again, as mentioned on here, he does have a good defense, natural +2. His grabs are pretty fun, especially when he gets them off. Good P2s, and again, his ult is actually a large, super explosive wave move, which is pretty nice. The only problem with that one is that sometimes it tends to destroy the planet, and then at that point, he just kind of neuters himself with his grabs. At that point, especially since he will grab you all the time and try to plant you in the air, in space, wherever he is. If there's no ground, you just don't take any damage. So it is unfortunate because it's really finicky when his ult goes off. It doesn't always destroy the planet, but then it does. So I don't know. He had some great moments for us. He just could be a bit frustrating in what he tended to do for us. He would either have matches where he would just be grabbing all the time and being rejected every time, like they don't want his soft embrace. And other times he would just throw his ki blasts, and oh god, I hate his ki blasts. He'll sit there and he just make that sound, and he just throws them, and they just kind of fly over the opponent's head. And he might connect with one if they're a bit tall, but he'll just throw them. If they're a short character, he'll just throw them, and the character will block. But they don't need to because he's a horrible aim, and he just throws them over him. And he would do that a lot too. Unless he has the low ground and they have the high ground, he could connect with it. But it's very frustrating. What we liked from him to do was he would come in with max power, and he's one of the only characters that we had access to that has a false courage as well as a power body at max power, which is very appealing, especially if he comes in, ping pongs, uses V2 or ults. But again, he just ended up being very inconsistent for us. And with the other two potential pickups we had at the time, and the two characters being Jason Birder, who we had thought were very solid for us at the time, there was no question that if we wanted to say a man or say a woman, both of them, we would have to drop Goldo along with somebody else. And Raccoon was the best candidate, considering Ginyu himself was actually a bit more consistent than Ginyu. Even though we were losing out on some of those extra tools that he does provide, it just was kind of a no-brainer at the time. Goldo, we all kind of know about Goldo. It was really tough with him working with Goldo because it felt like he would pop in the match, and depending on the opponent, they would not lose health. He just could not do enough damage. And and then we thought, okay, let's make him tanky. Well, if he's tanky, then he's still not doing damage, and he's just staying around a bit longer, but not doing any damage. And the opponent, they have a healing, like in Eternal Life or Dendays, they're just getting more health back. Yeah. His again B2's pretty bad. Ultimate also very bad. It was a liability, and which is why the moment we had a chance to drop him, we dropped him. So if anyone else wants to have fun with him, they can, and they can enjoy the suffering that he can provide at a low cost. But yeah, so there's a clear reason why he's there, and that was kind of the reason why we have Raccoon here currently as well.
Yeah, obviously, I don't think anything needs to be said on Salsa. I'm pretty sure that's much more of a dream than anything else here. But I think many people would not be surprised to see especially if Birder keeps struggling and Raccoon gets dropped by Cold. He's probably the only character here who could make a return if that even is an option. Because
Yeah.
again, the other characters on the squad are not in any way bad. There's no issues. They don't need to drop anybody. Raccoon has great natural stats for sure, but natural stats don't make a team and they don't make a character. So
True.
certainly not something that is a requirement. Uh, so yeah, Donut, I guess if you hate Dr. Gero, I think you should know exactly how Gomel feels about Goldo.
Yeah, I know the feel. When you have that character, you want to do things, they just don't do it. It's like why do I have you on the team right now? What am I doing? It feels bad. It really feels bad. But at least you have the Sayas, which help a lot, right? Help a big upgrade from Goldo, huge upgrade. So that's quite nice to have in your back pocket now.
Oh, definitely. And honestly, time will tell based on what we see in tests, and depending on, any drops. Because like I said, you guys had mentioned, I mean, really the only pickup we have that's right now is Goldo because he's not on a team. The other two, Salza, I don't see him being dropped at all. And Raccoon, he's on Cold, and I have no idea what Cold will. It's really, I don't want to, consider anything until we actually see exactly what moves they make. And, by that point, we'll have a better idea of where the rest of the team stands. And if Raccoon is somebody that we feel could maybe fill what we need, then there's always a possibility. But again, we're really not looking to drop anybody from the team unless there's just really a glaring issue that is made apparent during our testing.
Yeah, I think you guys have a solid squad. I think pretty much everybody knows that there's no matter how well you're doing in a season, that doesn't mean you guys are a bad squad or an extremely strong squad. They know you guys are coming in as just a very solid team. And certainly this last season maybe wasn't the best showing that Sentai has ever had. But you guys nearly took like many, many, many matches. Again,
Yeah.
they were probably the team everybody was most frustrated with watching just due to the fact of how many times they lost by like 1,000 health or some ridiculously low amount. It seemed like every time, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
team
Very
chat's
sad
got to
to
be
see.
fun right now. It's like if that one grab hit or that one B2,
Yeah. Yeah. But
just
they
one
beat.
health pushback,
Yeah.
would have
Yeah.
actually won the match or something.
Yeah. They were able to take down teams like Hybrids, right? Which is really good. And they almost took down teams like Namet. So
They
that's two
almost
from the
took Namek out
West
of
Coast.
playoffs. That would have been
Yeah, that would have been
hilarious.
insane. And Namet made
Yeah.
it to round 2, right? So
Yeah,
it
it was a very fun match. It was very close, but yeah, it was just very frustrating when you get that close. So it's definitely, yeah.
Jason was took down GT by himself. Fortunately, Birder did not do anything that day, but it just goes to show there are good and bad days, good and bad matchups. Pretty much every team has those, and I think everybody's always excited to see what Sentai has in the works. Very, very fun characters, and they're also versatile. You could like, it would be no surprise to see them on completely different builds by the end of this testing season, and they're still just very solid, just because they all can do so much stuff with how they, with just the kits that they have. So.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. I feel a lot of the characters, even in testing, we feel like everyone can kind of fit on various blues, and I feel like different roles can change. And even just as a note, surprisingly, we actually experimented with the defense Jace, and surprisingly, he for some reason really did well. So there's even things like that where I would never have thought of even attempting that before, but with that potential and just the consistency it has been, that could always be something as well. So it just shows you that you could see super plus Saiyaman and deep tanky Jace, with key Ginyu. I mean, for all we know, I mean, you never know.
Yeah, I could just say the way we found to fix Kid Buu this last season was to just give him defense +3 and launch it. It's like, all right, well now he can spam and he has the defense to hopefully not die while spamming. So sometimes that's how you do it. You just have to kind of give them the tools of to fix what faults they may or may not have. So yeah, testing's always extremely weird. I think pretty much all of us here can attest to having characters that it's like, why does that make him work? Why did this break him and this didn't? So it's part of what's so fun about the league. Just always an
Exactly.
infinite amount of possibilities. Well, with that, is there kind of anything else you want to go over, Sir Gomel of Sentai? Or is this
I'm
summed up your team?
I think it summed up my team. Probably maybe even more so now. Yeah, it's a very fun team. Again, very passionate about the team. I mean, I've stuck around with them for quite some time, and it's just because I just know what they can do, and when they pop off, they're just a joy to watch, and it just really gets me pumped, And that comes with the caveat of also the lows as well. But you take it, when you're on a team, you can't expect to win all the time. You have to like the team, otherwise, I mean, I don't know, it just feels very hollow if you don't enjoy the team.
You have a lot of active members on your squad.
We have a couple right now. Since it's during testing season, it's a bit kind of on the slower side, but there are some ideas, bounced around, and there's still some activity. I'm just making sure, doing my part by just keeping a solid stream of tests out, just to make sure we don't fall behind. That's mainly what I've been doing. And when things show up in tests that look really cool or interesting, we bring it up and just kind of go more into detail. But yeah, so I mean, we're fairly active, and we're fairly passionate bunch as well. I mean, you have to be if you're on Sentai, similar to like Derp in that sense. You have to enjoy the team to really appreciate it.
Sure. So question: what drew you to Sentai, or I guess Ginyu Force at the time? What drew you to them as the team to be a part of?
Well, I just remember watching, and whenever they would show up during a match, it was just very fun. And I remember just kind of like when I would see them, knowing kind of the struggles they've had before, having them just pop off and just kind of just really take it to whoever they're facing. It just made me really enjoy it, and that's kind of what drew me to them. And whereas no other team really seemed to kind of like do that for me, whereas them, when they are on point, they're one of the more fun teams to watch for me. And I think that still goes towards Sentai now, especially with some of the the additions and the theme and everything like that. So, but that's definitely what drew me to them, because I think I watched the league for about a year or two before I actually joined them in season 5 or 6. So, and that was when I decided, I really enjoy them. I root for them when I watch them. Let me join them. So,
Sure.
if there's any other Sentai people out there who really enjoy the theme, we're always looking for more people to help. If you want to see us rise and fall, as most teams do,
Rise. Yes.
yeah, we're here, and we would love to have you.
Who knows?
Nice.
Maybe 2021's year of Sentai.
Yes. Do you have a certain character you latch onto as your favorite, or just you abstain from that?
I really like the captain.
That's
Makes
fair. That's
sense.
fair. That makes sense. Yeah.
To his opening, when he's like looking underneath his legs, posing, and I don't know, he's just fun. Just when I see him, Say Woman's also really great, especially this season. But I have a lot of history with Ginyu, and I'm just glad to see him where he is. And I really like him. He's just a fun character.
Passion project finally showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I can feel that. Well, I don't really have much else to say. I think we've basically hit the end of what we wanted to talk
Well,
about. I think you ended
I
that
wanna-
very well, talking about your squad there. Is there
I do wanna
anything
talk
you
about
wanted
one
to
other
finish off with, Donut?
I want to talk about one other thing. I know testing is a hot commodity right now due to being off season and all, and you guys take a unique approach to testing as a team. You guys are one of the few teams to actually do in-house testing, where you guys test against your own members instead of facing against a bunch of other teams' members. Is there a certain reasoning behind that? What's your philosophy going into the off season for testing?
The idea is we know our members better than most other teams, and so for me, when I have a character that has been having a hard time, when I put them against a character who we know is fairly consistent for us, and we know how they perform, it's easier for us to say, okay, this is a good performance on this AI, because we know with this character how they have done, and it's easier for us to do that. Plus, it's also more consistency on the other character in question. But we do that because like lately we've usually go through a lot of Ginyu, because Ginyu was kind of our benchmark. He is kind of in the middle. He had good performances, and he does a little bit of everything. And he's also fairly aggressive. So if we have somebody that can consistently keep up with him and take more against him than he does against them, I feel like that helps us a lot more, as opposed to us like, here's Magic Vegeta. Okay, all right, you did something. All right, you're still dead. I just feel like we get more out of it testing with our members first to get a good benchmark, and then we do eventually go out and expand to other team members. But we usually go through that arduous testing period of our own in-house characters, and that's kind of the reason why. Because again, we it gives me a better idea, and us as a team a better idea of just how well that AI is working for that character, because we know the character they are facing in and out.
Gotcha. That's fair enough. Yeah, there's no right or wrong way of testing. It's how different teams want to go about doing the same thing.
Well, they have a Mr. Consistent, so that tends to
They
help
do.
out as well.
That helps a ton, right? When you have Mr. Take Your Man, it's very nice.
Well, with that, is there any, I guess, last things to say? You kind of already did your spiel on joining the team and stuff.
Always looking for supporters, you know. Go
Yeah.
for go to Sentai.
Toku Sentai, Toku Sentai, Toku Sentai.
And remember to scream your name out while you're posing.
Yes. For
That's very
optimum
important.
effect.
With that, I'm pulling to a close. Of course, as always, we'll have links to the Discord, the website, the Twitter, everything, every resource. The Discord's where you can literally talk to us, and if you wanted to talk with Sir Gomel about Sentai, he will obviously be glad to talk about it, and you can, of course, join on there. And you don't have to have major input, but just being there and joining a team is always very helpful. It helps the staff know if these teams are still, if there's still interest with them. So helps to keep them going as well as just having the people there. So, with that, that has been Capsule Cast Teams Sentai Squad Edition. I'm DoorGuard.
I'm Donut.
I'm Gomel.
Have a good one.
See you.